As someone who hadn't played the original Age of Wonders games, I didn't expect Age of Wonders 3 to end up consuming dozens of hours of my time, and yet that is precisely what happened. Age of Wonders 3, created by Triumph Studios, is a 4X turn-based strategy game and is set in a world full of your typical fantasy elements. There are dwarves, elves and orcs, there are lizard-like creatures called the Draconians, and of course dragons, there's plenty of divine and arcane magic around, and then there's also a bunch of steampunk machinery, but does all of this work? The first thing that struck me as I loaded up one of the 2 different campaigns was the impressive strategic map with a real sense of atmosphere that I hadn't seen in a 4X game in a while. The Overworld Map and the subterranean network that is often present comes in the form of a well-detailed board game. Lush forests, gold mines, magical nodes, volcanoes and blighted swamps, they're all out there for you to find. The game has a real sense of atmosphere, and certainly the excellent music greatly assists in this endeavor. The game is then split into 2 general maps, the strategic map and the combat map, and luckily this great visual style carries over into the combat phase of the game, offering quite a few visually impressive battlegrounds for your units to fight on. However, before you jump into the action, you must first select or create your leader. Age of Wonders 3 allows you to play as one of 6 different races, defined initially by your leader choice. These races all have small, subtle changes, and their own variations of similar units that can definitely make a difference at times, but aren't incredibly important, and yet serve to add a nice extra level of potential min-maxing to your strategy. Goblins are cheap, have resistances to all kinds of nasty poisons, but unfortunately tend to drop like flies. It's a good thing there's a lot of them. Elves instead offer better movement through dense forestry and are incredibly handy with a bow but deal poorly with disease. The various racial units largely serve a similar purpose. Elves got archers, humans got archers, and orcs too got archers, but here and there have unique features such as the Goblin Swarm Darter doing additional blight damage, without suffering from a multitude of potential range penalties during combat. Because, as it turns out, shooting insects at your enemy is a little bit different from shooting arrows. Or the Draconian Flyer, a late game infantry unit with the ability to, well, shockingly, fly. But in the end, you can quite easily access the other race's units by simply capturing one of their cities and absorbing it into your empire. The main difference then comes in the form of your leader class, one of the strongest aspects of Age of Wonders 3. In total, there are 6 different classes and they all offer a rather different and distinct playstyle. The Dreadnought, a technology genius equipped with a powerful musket, is a relatively slow class to play but ends up literally steamrolling their enemies with the might of his expensive but powerful machines. The Sorcerer focuses mainly on the mana resource and is less concerned with recruiting units directly, as it can conjure up entire armies of magical creatures through the use of his spells, backed up by support units that stun his enemies. And the Rogue is a class that relies on speed, stealth and deception, as she recruits scoundrels and assassins, or incites revolt, drastically lowering the happiness of an enemy city. All of these classes have very distinct upgrades that not only affect your class-specific units, but in addition upgrade the related racial units, allowing you to really end up specializing your army to your playstyle, such as say the aforementioned Goblin Swarm Darters receiving archery upgrades through the Druid class. Yet, with all of this, the design of the game allows for a steady and easy learning curve. The UI is practical and the beautiful hex-based map is easy to navigate. Any small numbers that you might end up missing can often be found in the rather comprehensive in-game manual, the Tome of Wonders. The result is a game that has plenty of depth without having an intimidating learning curve. That being said, domination is the name of the game, and luckily this game does that very well. Towns might be crucial in Age of Wonders 3, but they certainly aren't very complex. They look visually distinct depending on the race, but otherwise lack variation and have little individual character. Towns are on the back burner when it comes to lengthy buildings or researching projects, and are more of strategic importance, projecting your domain and giving you a location to produce units from. The world is defined into plenty of different environments, ranging from Arctic to volcanic, and depending on the map settings, there's often an entire underworld system to explore. Races have different environmental preferences, meaning that setting up an elven city in a barren wasteland might not be the best of choices. Sadly, the game never really tempts you to do this either. There are no unique resources to be found and guarded in the different environments or underground caverns. They do definitely have an impact, however. The result of these different environments means you have plenty of freedom and movement across the map, and a bit of clever environment managing can result in your enemies having to take the long way around, or move over terrain their units suffer movement or morale penalties on. Again, it all feeds nicely into the domination goal of the game. Diplomacy is then also one of the weakest points of the game, and essentially comes down to, are you going to be nice or not? Based in part on your alignment, neutral cities can often quite easily be conquered. Alternatively, you can complete quests that they will randomly give you, which eventually results in them joining your empire. Other empire leaders are likely to go to war with you on sight, but if you are feeling merciful, you can set up small alliances that, unfortunately, they don't often hold their other AI buddies to. Meaning that, in the end, this game is all really about conquest, and again, it does it so well. The RPG elements in Age of Wonders 3 are a definite highlight. Heroes, one of which is your leader, are key to victory and are based on the same set of classes that your leader can have. They go into combat mounted, often leading an army, learning various new skills and passive traits as they level up, and can be equipped with various items that sadly aren't actually shown but can definitely boost your army to new heights. You are then unlikely to win your conquest goal unless you've properly gone exploring across the map, raiding treasure sites and wizard towers filled with all kinds of mysterious creatures. Not just for the loot, but also the levels your heroes and individual army units will achieve, as there is definitely a lot more to every unit that might appear on first sight. Now, combat itself is then mostly done in small skirmishes, a group with a maximum of 6 units clashing against another group of 6. These are important small-scale fights, where often one wrong move can cost you the fight, and potentially the city or life of your hero unit. These are a frequent occurrence, but there is the possibility of having 7 of these groups of 6 fighting in a surprisingly intense, large-scale conflict. Army composition and upgrades then take a key role, not to mention the various spells you may have researched. My one issue here then comes in the form of the siege fights over cities that have the worst design. There are plenty of interesting combat maps and locations to fight over, but you are most often going to be fighting over important cities, probably protected by wooden or stone walls. And these maps unfortunately have no variation. Every siege map is the same, and due to the linear nature of this layout, it often results in one way. Defenders take up high ground positions on the walls, and attackers either climb over the walls, break the walls, or simply fire back. They certainly aren't easier for it, every move still being incredibly important, but they simply get tedious the quickest, which is unfortunate as the turn-based combat is simply excellent. Finally, Age of Wonders 3 has plenty of content for you to play through. There are 2 campaigns, each of which offer a few different maps based on a faction choice halfway through, and although the story is largely cheesy, it does give you a good sense of the world you're fighting in and remain enjoyable due to the well-crafted maps. There are then a couple of scenarios, again well crafted, and a great random map generator that is likely to take up the most of your time either online or offline. I wasn't kidding when I said Age of Wonders 3 ended up consuming a ton of my time. Currently having clocked somewhere around 80 hours prior to this review, and I regret not 1 second of it. It is easy to get into and yet offers so much depth in its excellent conquest-oriented gameplay. If you are looking for a beautiful, fantasy, turn-based strategy game that is all about tiny RPG elements and combat, then Age of Wonders 3 is likely to satisfy your needs. Age of Wonders 3 gets an 8.5 out of 10.